You finally got it. The job, the relationship, the achievement you'd been chasing for years, sometimes decades, planning constantly, obsessively, around this exact moment. And instead of the relief you expected, instead of the joy everyone assumes you're feeling right now, there's just quiet. A strange, hollow quiet, sitting exactly where celebration was supposed to arrive, right on schedule, precisely on cue, and somehow simply didn't. This isn't ingratitude. It isn't depression exactly either, though it can look remarkably similar from the outside, confusing everyone watching, including yourself. You keep waiting for the feeling to catch up, telling yourself it just needs another day, another week, a little more time to settle in properly. It's something far more specific, tied directly to how your mind actually operated during every single year spent chasing this particular thing. This video explains what your brain was doing that entire time, and why arriving somewhere rarely feels the way you imagined arriving would. Think back to the moment itself. The news arrives, or the ring appears, or the acceptance letter finally actually shows up in your inbox. For a few seconds, there's genuine excitement. Then something odd happens. The feeling starts fading almost immediately, faster than it should, faster than expected. You wait for the deeper satisfaction to settle in, the one you've been promising yourself through every difficult, exhausting year of pursuit. It doesn't fully arrive. Not the way you'd built it up in your mind. Across countless imagined versions of this exact triumphant scene, you find yourself checking, almost testing, whether the feeling might still be delayed somehow, replaying the moment, hoping satisfaction simply took a wrong turn. People congratulate you, and you perform gratitude convincingly, while privately wondering why this doesn't feel like it's supposed to feel. You smile in photos, say all the right things, and somewhere underneath, quietly catalog the gap between the reaction you're giving and the one you actually feel. Within days, sometimes hours, your mind has already quietly started scanning for the next target, the next thing worth chasing after this one. It happens almost against your will. A small itch forming, asking what's next, before this achievement has even finished being fully acknowledged by anyone. You notice the pattern eventually, how the chasing itself felt more alive than any single moment of actually, finally having something. Looking back across your life, you realize nearly every finish line produced this same brief flash, followed by the same familiar quiet. This isn't about being ungrateful or broken. It's about a very specific mismatch between two systems your brain uses and rarely balances well. There's a name for this in psychology: Arrival Fallacy. The mistaken belief that reaching a goal will produce lasting, stable happiness afterward. The term was coined to describe exactly this gap between the happiness people expect upon arrival and the happiness that actually, measurably shows up. Neuroscience adds another layer here. Your brain actually runs two separate systems, one for wanting things, another entirely for liking things once obtained. The wanting system runs on dopamine, and it's activated almost entirely by pursuit itself, anticipation, striving, the gap between here and there. Dopamine, importantly, isn't actually a pleasure chemical. It's a motivation chemical, firing hardest during the chase, not during the moment of finally catching anything. The liking system is quieter, slower, and frankly, less developed in people who spend most of their lives pursuing rather than possessing. So, the moment arrival actually happens, the loud wanting system suddenly goes silent, while the quieter liking system never got much practice. This creates a genuine neurological gap, a real, measurable absence where satisfaction should exist. Not simply a character flaw or ingratitude. For people who've spent years achieving constantly, this pattern repeats endlessly. Each finish line simply reveals another distant, waiting starting line instead. The chase becomes the actual home. Arrival becomes strange, unfamiliar territory the mind never fully learned how to properly, comfortably inhabit. Over time, this even shapes how goals themselves get chosen. New ones selected primarily for how well they'll sustain the chase, not the having. Something specific happens inside people who develop this pattern early. Achievement becomes tied tightly to identity, worth, and constant ongoing self-proof. If love or approval felt conditional on accomplishment growing up, the goal itself becomes less about desire and more about survival entirely. In that environment, wanting stays permanently activated, because stopping to simply enjoy something felt dangerously close to becoming complacent, or replaceable, or worse. The nervous system adapts by never fully powering down the pursuit circuit, treating rest and satisfaction as subtle threats rather than rewards. This explains why achieving something can trigger anxiety instead of relief. The pursuit circuit searching frantically for its next necessary assignment immediately. It can even feel physically uncomfortable to simply sit inside a finished accomplishment, the body registering stillness itself as unfamiliar, almost unsafe territory. Here's something worth holding on to because we'll return to it directly. This restlessness reflects a mind built for genuine growth, not deficiency. As an adult, this often shows up as immediately setting new goals the moment old ones complete, without ever truly pausing between them. You may notice discomfort during rest, vacations, or celebrations. Moments specifically designed for satisfaction, feeling oddly, persistently unfamiliar and uncomfortable instead. Even genuine, hard-won success can feel like it belongs to someone else, since the identity was built entirely around chasing, not having. This creates a quiet exhaustion, endlessly running toward horizons that shift the instant you're finally actually close enough to touch them. And it isn't limited to major milestones either. It shows up in small daily wins too, each one dissolving into the next task almost instantly. Over years, this compounds into a subtle, persistent sense that nothing is ever quite enough, regardless of how objectively significant the achievement actually was. The mind essentially becomes fluent in departure and pursuit, while remaining almost entirely untrained in the separate, equally necessary skill of staying. Think of the person who gets promoted, feels briefly proud, then spends that same evening quietly researching the next possible promotion instead. Look at the one who finally enters the relationship they wanted for years, only to feel strangely restless within the very first month. There's the moment when someone finishes a massive project, expecting relief, and instead feels an unsettling void where accomplishment should genuinely be. Watch the student who gets the acceptance letter, celebrates for an evening, then immediately starts anxiously planning for the next big milestone ahead. Notice the athlete who wins the championship and within days feels strangely empty, already fixated on training for whatever comes next. Think of the person who buys the home they saved years for, then wanders through empty rooms feeling oddly disconnected from the achievement. Look at the one who reaches a specific number on the scale, expecting transformation, and instead feels exactly, disappointingly, the same as before. There's the entrepreneur who sells the company for the number they always wanted, then can't explain why the moment feels utterly hollow. Notice the writer, who finally holds the finished published book and feels a strange grief instead of triumph, unsure exactly why. Watch the parent who reaches the milestone they set for their child, only to immediately begin worrying about the next developmental benchmark ahead. There's the person who finally pays off years of debt, expecting freedom and instead feels a disorienting absence where relief should clearly be. Think of the couple who finally has the wedding they planned for years, only to feel a quiet letdown once the actual day concludes. And there's the quiet, specific loneliness of achieving something everyone admires, while privately wondering what, if anything, was the actual point. This creates a particular kind of grief, mourning satisfaction you were promised, that somehow never actually showed up when it mattered. Rewind briefly to a detail that deserves more weight now. This restlessness reflects a mind genuinely built for growth, not for deficiency. A wanting system this strong isn't broken. It's precisely what drove exploration, ambition, and progress across your entire considerable life so far. Every major thing you've ever built, learned, or accomplished exists specifically because this system refused to simply settle for standing still. The problem was never that you want things intensely. The problem is that liking, savoring, and resting never received equal, deliberate development. These are separate, trainable systems, not fixed personality traits. One simply received far more practice than the other one ever did. Think of it less as a flaw in your character and more as an asymmetry in two muscles that were never given the same amount of exercise. Here's the reframe worth genuinely sitting with. You're not incapable of satisfaction. You've simply never given that particular muscle real, sustained exercise. Every achievement you've ever chased proves the wanting system works beautifully. The liking system just needs its own deliberate, patient training now. This isn't a flaw to eliminate. It's an imbalance worth correcting between two systems that were always designed to work together properly. So where does this actually begin to shift? It starts with deliberately pausing after achievements, staying present in discomfort, rather than immediately fleeing. It means practicing savoring small moments daily. A good meal, a quiet win. Training the underused liking system through simple repetition. It means noticing the urge to immediately chase the next goal and consciously delaying it, even briefly, before allowing pursuit to resume. It means naming the achievement out loud sometimes, describing exactly what it took to get here, rather than rushing silently past it. It means allowing other people's genuine celebration to actually land, instead of deflecting it quickly toward whatever comes next on the list. It means separating identity from achievement gradually, understanding your worth was never actually dependent on the next available finish line. This wanting system served you remarkably well for a long time. It was ambitious, adaptive, and genuinely necessary. Balance is simply overdue now. You don't need to want less. You simply need to practice staying, occasionally, in the very places your wanting already worked so hard to reach. Because arrival was never actually the problem. You were simply never taught how to stay somewhere long enough to genuinely feel it.